fellow tea lovers. Settle in, because we've got a story. I'm Nell.
And I'm Rose, and today we're bringing you the tea.
Across eras. It feels like it's been a long time since I've seen you, but it's just I've been out of town all week.
Yeah, no, and it feels like we've been living 5 lives.
Right. Okay, so I have a question to open up today's story. Besides being like Disney princess stories, what do Snow White and Cinderella have in common?
They both have iterations across a ton of different cultures.
Right. And they also have wicked stepmommies.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I missed the mark entirely. Well, ask an open-ended question.
Exactly. So I'm like thinking about this the other day and I'm like, but why? Women are pitted against women all the time. I don't know why we're not supporting each other, because if we did for one hot second, we would take over the world.
I think the stepmother thing, especially in such an old story, a lot of it is the story is taking place in an aristocratic family and a different bloodline is coming in and trying to have their say-so. It goes good, bad, and in the middle.
That is definitely one of the things I found out. So, someone who's kind of credited with being like an OG wicked stepmom is Livia Drusilla.
Well, if you're going to go Roman, those are some family relationships that really ought to be on TV more.
And apparently they are. There's a TV show that's more modern about her and has her younger. I read an article about it on the BBC. I'll link that in the sources section on our website.
But back up, so just tell me who Livia Drusilla is.
So Livia Drusilla, she's the first Roman empress. She came to power in 44 BC. So here's the story. This is the story of her. And the sources differ a lot.
As they generally do.
Yeah. She married Tiberius Claudius Nero around 43 BC. She had one son with him, Tiberius also. And then in 38 BC, she's pregnant with Drusus, and she divorces Tiberius Claudius Nero and marries Octavian. And then the Senate grants Octavian this title Augustus in 27 BC, which that kind of makes him emperor, and her empress.
You have a ton of major and minor political struggles in this time period. You have family members murdering each other. You have incest to preserve bloodlines. It's a hell of a ride of a time.
Right. And so by the time they get married, she's also now going to be the stepmom to his at least one daughter, who's old enough to get married and has 2 sons. So succession would mean that one of his daughter's sons, the oldest one I presume, will probably take over, but they die. So rumors and gossip starts to spread. You know, how very coincidental that her 2 step-grandsons both died.
It's a pretty dangerous occupation to have any sort of hereditary right to a title in ancient Rome.
And even when her husband died of kind of old age-ish, the rumors only grew. So,
whenever you have a lady in power and people around her are starting to go down, poison definitely comes up. Sometimes it actually is what's happening, but like women get associated with poison as a less aggressive form of murder.
Yeah. And in those times, also, it wasn't really like done to especially publicly smack talk your emperor.
No.
But you could smack talk the woman he was attached to. That was more allowed.
You're taking your life into your hands a little bit, but yeah.
You could do it like secretly and, guess what I heard.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but you probably didn't go publish it.
Yeah, you'd think real hard before doing so.
Yeah. So another problem, though, whether or not she had anything to do with their deaths, a lot of the history as we know it has been told to us by men.
I'm reading an interesting book right now about female medieval writers that made the point that you are almost always not just hearing the voice of the female writer, but the voice of the scribe or the secretary or the confessor or whoever was writing it, because it was very, very, very rare that a woman was documenting her own life.
Yep. There's this historian around this time, and his name is pronounced Tacitus, and he wrote that Livia was a scheming, ruthless, power-hungry puppet master who would stop at nothing to secure her son's position of power. And by her son, I mean Augustus, named after the man she divorced, that son, not after Octavian's son.
Well, and Augustus is quite often a regnal name, like how the Georges weren't always George until
Yes.
they chose that name.
And that is why there's a lot of names that are really familiar sounding in this.
Yes.
They might not be the people. So, around the world, the wicked stepmom trope, it kind of plays itself out to fit into the social norms and customs of the time. Like, for example, in regions where maybe a man would have multiple wives, the trope could be something like the second wife who tortures, and like makes life so terrible for like the virtuous first wife or the virtuous first wife's daughter or something like that.
Well, because every story has to have a bad guy, and that is an extremely easy to fit bad guy narrative.
Yeah.
It does things that you want it to. If you're speaking in a political context, it probably makes a whole lot of sense for some factions to start rumors about, wow, this person does not have the best interests of this family or this bloodline at heart. They weren't even born into it. They just married into it.
Yep.
It's very easy to make them the bad guy in the story, whether or not it's true, which sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't.
In some like older European societies, they would have these similar kind of stories, but it might be like your mother-in-law, obviously. Mm-hmm. It could be like a sister or sister-in-law, just jealousy, women against women, all that stuff. According to Maria Tater, who's a folklore expert from Harvard, the stepmom trope reflected the reality of that time. Childbirth is still kind of dangerous. Without modern medicine, not everybody survived it. And so Tarter said that there was a point in time around the era in which the Grimm's brothers collected all their works that about half of kids were growing up with one biological parent and one step-parent. And so there, over time, especially more modern, there's some attempts to overturn that trope. And this isn't really an attempt to overturn it, but do you recognize these books?
Those are the Disney princess kind of short picture book story ones that I can see the Barnes & Noble tag that I used to have to move a metric ton of every Christmas. But I remember them so well from my childhood. They had versions of those you got for free at McDonald's.
Yeah.
I remember those.
Yeah. So these particular ones are called My Side of the Story. Mm-hmm. And I have two. I have Snow White and Cinderella. On one side it's Snow White, and then you flip it over and upside down, and you have Snow White's stepmother, the Queen, and you have Cinderella's stepmother, Lady Tremaine. So these books, they didn't particularly overturn the trope, but they gave it kind of a humorous other side of the story. I'm going to read you a little bit from Lady Tremaine's point of view. That's Cinderella's stepmom. I remember the day I first began to suspect that Cindy wasn't quite as sweet as she pretended to be. Right, so this whole story is about her noticing that her girls are just, shy and awkward, and Cinderella's so great. Yeah, obviously she's up to nothing good. So she decides to tell her daughters that they're not going to be spending much time with their stepsister Cindy anymore. She says, "You'll be too busy with your important new responsibilities. From now on, you, Anastasia, will be in charge of coming to your music lessons on time. You will also pick flowers for the luncheon table and make sure your dirty clothing is in the basket where it belongs." Then she tells the girls their responsibilities, and they're like, "Mama, what about Cindy? Does she have new responsibilities too?" And she says, "Yes, indeed. Cindy will do the washing and the ironing. She will sweep, scrub, and dust. She'll serve us breakfast, do the mending, and feed the animals." "That sounds fair," said Anastasia. Tears filled my eyes. What good, brave girls I had.
You're absolutely going to favor your own offspring over the ones that were already there. Marriage, particularly between people with money, is always a business proposition. And if you came with your own interests, those aren't likely to change.
Exactly. And she's Lady Tremaine, so I assume that means Cinderella's dad had something.
Right. In any version of the story, it's the dad is well off and needs someone to run his household. It's nice that it gets framed as, I want a mother for my daughter, but what it really is I need a lady to run my household.
It is. So, the Wicked Queen, who is Snow White's stepmother, the Queen, her story starts off with, "First of all, unless you've raised a teenage girl yourself, you have no idea what an ordeal it is. Teenage girls are lazy, they're impolite, they eat junk, and they need constant supervision because they're boy crazy." Right. And she's like, "I'm a widow. I was left to raise Snow White all by myself. I was a hard-working single parent who didn't get a speck of help."
And to be fair, if she's still in a position of power as Snow White is growing up, that means she's running at least a region.
Yeah.
So, I mean, administratively, that costs. And historically speaking, people don't tend to make that easy for a lady.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. And so, of course, the Snow White story is based on vanity. Also, I'm sure the underlining of the story are about power. But, you know, the magic mirror constantly tells the queen how beautiful she is. And in this story, she's like, yeah, I totally know it.
Isn't it interesting that this person who is running a region possibly without a whole lot of support is getting framed as, well, she's just full of vanity. She just loves the pretty side of it.
It is. You know, these books, when did they come out? Let's see. 2003. So these are not politically correct. Let's be real. They're pretty insensitive. Listen to this. You're a growing girl, I told Snow White. You need exercise. Start by hauling 100 buckets of water down to the dungeon. I renovated after the funeral, and now it's my office. To my amazement, Snow White wasn't the least bit grateful. Here I was, giving her an opportunity to get muscle tone and burn calories, and she whined.
This is super 2003 vernacular.
Oh, yeah.
They weren't really trying to make it fairy tale-esque sounding. It's interesting because you can hear the voice.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, this one, I mean, it's just funny to see the other side of it. I like these books. I have a lot more, but those are the only wicked stepmoms. It is. But nowadays, I thought of a lot of examples of things that kind of take the blended family, and it just is. It's not really the point of it, it just is. One of my favorite cartoons is Phineas and Ferb. They're stepbrothers. That comes up maybe once.
And that's really a cool sign of it becoming so unremarkable that it doesn't need to be a storyline in order to be explained.
Yep. I really like it. And then I was thinking, the TV show Modern Family, you know, that had a very different blended family, and that show was really great. I enjoyed that show so much.
I think it gets tiring explaining if your family represents an anomaly to someone else. The constant, well, why did you do that is berating.
I remember learning in elementary school about, like, the nuclear family and all of the phrases that they use for that.
Idealized, although it has barely ever existed.
Yeah, but in my memory, I remember maybe 2 or 3 kids being like, oh yeah, I have a step-parent. Mm-hmm. And I knew one of my friends lived with her mom and stepdad, but overall, and of course it's been a really long time ago, I might just don't remember, people didn't talk that much about it. Mm-hmm. Like, because it was a thing.
Yeah, not talking about things doesn't make them not exist. So even though it's nice to see things normalized to the point where they aren't required to be a conversation, sometimes it's nice to have the conversation anyway.
Right.
It's situational.
Yeah. Nowadays, we have the blended family of Kourtney Kardashian and Travis Barker. She has 3 kids. He has 3 kids, and now they have 1 together.
Well, it's not the modern Brady. It's definitely a different way to live.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, the Brady Bunch. That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. They were, like, matched off in cute little pairs in the Brady Bunch.
Yeah, well, you know, people like visual symmetry.
Yeah. Kourtney and Travis's family. Travis has 3 kids. His youngest, I think, just turned 18 or will be 19 soon. Of Kourtney's kids, I think the oldest one is like maybe 14, 13. He just came out with an Instagram account, and it's very branded. Let me tell you.
Yeah. It's interesting to see the differences between a rich family that is being blended that has dynastic concerns and a rich family that is being blended that doesn't have those parameters. Like, what are their priorities?
Funny you should mention that, because they don't have dynastic concerns, obviously. Right. But for more than a year after they got married, they kept their separate houses and kind of lived in them. And I think I heard recently that they had finally bought a house together. But, like, her 3 kids spend, I think, maybe, like, an equal amount of time with their dad. And his 3 kids are old enough that they don't, you know, they can do that on their own. They don't have to abide by anything. But the oldest of his 3 kids is not his biological kid. It's the child of his ex-wife and her former husband or boyfriend. But he's raised her since he was married, and she stayed with them. And very blended.
Do you think that the concern over maintaining the honor of your family in a historical sense, do you think that's comparable to maintaining the integrity of the family brand in a modern influencer sense?
Yes. And in that sense, I would say Kourtney's like almost rebelled against her family. All of her other siblings who have kids, which is three of our sisters have multiple kids, and then our brother only has one kid, and one sister has no kids. But all of their kids are by the same man. Even her sister, who has just unfortunate luck with men, and she's had her first kid with this guy, and then he was like cheating all over her publicly right before the baby was born, and everyone found out. And then they kind of got back together, which, right when it came out again that he had impregnated another woman, like literally days before, they had made the decision to have embryos put in a surrogate.
Oh.
So she's got 2 kids with him. But yeah, it seems, and this is a rumor, thank you Reddit, maybe the family thinks that it's a good look to have all your children with the same 2 parents. I don't know, because Chris doesn't. She's got 4 from Robert and 2 with Caitlyn Jenner.
Branding is the new bloodline.
Yeah, I can see that. And because every single one of those kids will be branded, except maybe Kylie's kids.
Yeah, their lives will be absolutely curated because that's where the monetary value rests.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Both of us have some sort of blended-ish type families as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I have my stepmom, I have 2 stepsisters. I also have, from a totally different direction in the family, my 2 nieces who, I mean, if you want to get technical, they're like my ex-step nieces, but they're my nieces.
But you don't, the connection is never emphasized. Same thing with my half-brother was always, that's your brother, and that's how I've always felt.
Oh, weird. Like, I totally know he's your half-brother, but I guess I never thought of it.
Yeah, it's just, we've never emphasized it.
Yeah. So it's interesting just the difference that, like, blended families have. Mm-hmm. But back to Livia. Miss Livia. Was she a power-hungry murderer? Maybe. I don't know. Also, though, maybe she was a smart woman who took advantage of her circumstances.
It's like Empress Matilda. She gets called a she-wolf. So she and Stephen were 2 factions in an English Civil War. She was William the Conqueror's granddaughter and absolutely the heir her father had named her. But when it came to her actual coronation, people just rioted. They just didn't think that a queen was going to be effective, helpful. The king still needed to be a warrior figure. So she gets framed as this just completely power-hungry, avaricious, crazy woman when she was asserting the rights that she had been raised to pick up. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so it's like, was she a bitch? Maybe. Was that the point? Probably.
Right. Well, I mean, think about how hard the PR machine has been at work for the now Queen Camilla. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, I don't really have any opinions on them. They're not my monarchy. Their personal lives are their personal lives, but they're public figures, so they're also public. But for whatever it's worth, Charles and Camilla seem to really be into each other. But if you had said in the mid-90s, if the Queen had been like, it's cool if Camilla becomes the Queen, like the world would have ended.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that was not going to be a thing. And then everybody sort of softened over time.
Right. The PR machine did good. Yep. They had her at all the right things, looking all the right ways. She never publicly says anything that's like offensive.
Yeah, public perception is why people get away with things. If you have good public perception, you have a much wider margin to work inside.
And it's wild thinking about just the rules they have to follow. And again, I don't know. I only know what I hear in gossip, People magazine type things. But you gotta wonder, like with William, has he just accepted the fact that his mom is gone? That's who his dad is super happy with now. So now I don't know if he does since he's like the prince, but probably. You have to bow to people a lot.
Yeah, that's a weird factor we don't have in most blended families. Who curtsies to who?
Right, imagine if your parent marries their lover and now you have to bow to her.
Or you have to figure out an entirely different title that you have to call her now in public because your grace and her royal majesty are not the same things.
Isn't that wild? I read this journal article by a lady named Diana E. Kleiner, and she says that Livia was smart and savvy enough to take advantage of her situation, and she was able to acquire that influence in a time when women could not vote, could not hold public office, or even appear in public without a guardian.
But it is important to note, was allowed to get a divorce.
Yep, because she did.
Mm-hmm. So it was by no means equal, but there was enough of a power structure there that she could access that she could take advantage of it.
If a man did it, it would be fine.
He would be ambitious and manly and cunning.
There's literally a Taylor Swift song about that. Also, Diana E. Kleiner She is a member of the faculty at Yale of Arts and Sciences.
Yale does good work. They have an amazing library.
I wish I could visit it. Have you finished Babel?
I know.
Okay,
I read the
fine.
stupid book. All right, I'm not going to mention the name of the book, but it was a Greek myth book that I don't like the way it was narrated, and I got progressively more angry at it every time I picked it up, but I wanted to finish it. But they just changed narrators too often, and at one point, the narrator was a crow and started the chapter, like...
What? Girl, that's when you just read the Wikipedia summary.
I was like halfway through before I got to the real anger. Like I felt like she was stepping in as an author every 5 minutes and pulling the curtain aside and rapping me on the head like, "Did you get that point that I wanted you to get?" Oh. And it's just, it feels clunky, and it had such good recommendations.
Isn't it interesting how different recommendations from people who you've maybe trusted a lot of their recommendations in the past, and you're just like, this is the worst thing I've ever read.
Yeah. And it's just, I actually feel a little bit worse about you as an expert because you recommended this.
There's the book about, was it H.H. Holmes? Is that his name? H.H. Holmes is like America's serial killer.
That's not actually something I'm familiar with.
Well, hang on. We're going to take a little detour. The reason I bring it up is because there is a book called The Devil in the White City. And it's super popular, highly recommended. I hated every single second of it.
That's so fun. That's one of those ones that I sold 1 million copies of and never actually picked up and kind of felt bad about it. I feel a little bit better now.
No. Let me give you a summary of it. If this is a spoiler, I'm sorry. Like, it's been out a long time. Either fast forward or you should have read it now. So the full title of the book is, hey, it's also came out in 2003. We're on a streak with 2003 books today. So it's considered historical nonfiction, and it's presented in the style of a novel. The full title is The Devil in the White City, Murder, Magic, and Madness at the Fair That Changed America.
And the premise is really cool. The idea of that World's Fair, it's Chicago, right?
Yes.
The city that they built out of plaster, that whole concept just is so cool to me. I think that's a great setting for a book. It saddens me.
Maybe
you didn't enjoy
you might like it. I don't know. I didn't like it. But basically it's set during the Chicago World Fair, and it tells the story of the architect of the World Fair, I think his name's like Daniel Burnham, and of H.H. Holmes, who is a real person, not his real name, but he's a criminal, and he's widely considered the first serial killer in the U.S.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Actually, Leonardo DiCaprio purchased the film rights for that in 2010.
Okay.
But it's been in, I guess, negotiation, heck.
Production hell.
Right. The book, because it's told like a novel, I expected a novel, I guess, to begin with. But there's like no real dialogue. There's like summaries of what people may have said.
So it's all presented as like rumor and...
Yeah, so I don't know. I just didn't really like it.
Sometimes the style just kills the story.
Yeah. The whole thing about the guy running the World Fair, that is much more interesting because there were so many challenges. Like, is it going to be safe? Things like that.
Let's see, Chicago in what, 1890,
1893.
So no, it's not going to be safe.
No.
We'll check that one off.
Right. The side story in there is H.H. Holmes, whose real name is Herman Webster Mudgett. I changed my name.
I can see why you'd change that. Yeah, no, stage name required.
Right. Like, he was a super con artist, insurance fraud, forgery, multiple bigamous marriages because he never got divorced, horse theft, and then murder. The reason they tie together is because during the time of the World Fair, he had built like this murder castle, and he had rooms on the bottom that could be rented out. There's 3 floors. So rooms on the bottom that could be rented out as shops and whatnot. Apartments in there, but tons of secret places. Like secret furnace to burn the people to ash when he was done.
If you're going to be a serial killer, be efficient.
Right. And his story is kind of hard to know what's factual completely. He gave lots of different reasons for doing things.
He's got no reason to be completely honest. He's telling a story because he got to be famous.
Not at all. It seems like, and I'm going to paraphrase this, I'll link this in the sources section as well if you're interested. The podcast Morbid, it did like a 4-part series on him because there's so much stuff that he does that's so wild. And he may or may not have killed one of his classmates, sold his classmate's body off like to an underground doctor.
Birkin hairstyle.
Yeah, to study on. But he'd also taken out insurance on the person he killed.
Twofer. That's actually a Birkin hairstyle thing, too. They would get the back rent from family members as well as the sale price of the corpse.
Wow. So, yeah, that was A.J. Jones. That's just a story. I just didn't love the style.
Yeah, and whereas the premise of the story sounds interesting as hell, if it's a bad narrative.
Apparently, a lot of people didn't think it was bad.
No, okay, no, and that's not what I mean to say. If it's a narrative that does not speak to you, then fire can't burn that opinion out of you. It just may not be for you.
It is what it is, yeah.
It's just organically true.
If someone had written it in a more fictional account, where you kept all the facts true, but maybe, like, gave them conversations, I don't know, something about it just bothered me.
I've seen good versions of that, and I've seen crap versions of that.
Yeah,
so, it really depends.
There's no women in his story, though, that are really having a moral struggle for power. I feel like throughout the ages of monarchies, you have people murdering people for the throne. Sometimes they still get it.
No, absolutely.
Not a woman.
No, absolutely not. You can have a variety of different personality types, flaws, good, bad. That's just the facets of a man, but it's called into question entirely whether you're mentally or physically capable at all, just minus some genitalia.
Exactly. You always hear like, oh, a woman president would just be like too emotional. Are you kidding? I've never punched a hole in anything because I was mad.
I've never punched a hole in anything.
Well, there we go. I wouldn't just press nuclear codes when I was having PMS issues one day.
Well, but we're also talking about times when the Aristotelian ideals are still holding true, where if you're pretty, it's because you're good, and if you are a lady, you actually do have testicles, they're just on the inside. Like, the level of understanding of the differences between the sexes is so shrouded in mystery for so much of our history.
It really is.
That even now, you can argue with someone about the mechanics of your own body and lose.
Dude, I have seen people screenshot things and put them on the internet, and you just gotta like sometimes naively hope that they're fake. But it's like, what do you mean you started your period? Can't you hold it in? No.
I think it's just disgusting when women bleed at all. I mean, you can definitely pick that. Seeing those
what?
arguments.
Stop it. Stop it. But those tropes of, how women were supposed to be, at least in our country and some others, they're not officially in place anymore because women can do all kinds of things. But in some ways, I feel like we hold ourselves back sometimes. I'm not saying men don't make it hard because they really do. But there are some things, and I'm like, we could just lift each other up and solve this problem, y'all.
It's definitely serves a lot of powerful interests for people to spend their energy bickering with each other rather than actually spend their energy on the things that would uplift them.
Oh, I think about this all the time. I'm like, the world's coming to an end. The rich are getting richer. The middle class is evaporating. But we don't care because we gotta be like, well, should we put on the ballot that we should take away these rights next? So we all get wrapped up in like these small things that aren't going to change anything.
Minutia.
I mean, they're going to change things poorly.
But minutia is not the right word. It's just the tiny part of the larger whole. But I guess the real point is, are you going to be a Petrarch and look towards the past and dream about the future, or are you going to be a Boccaccio and dig your way into the present?
It's just confusing and annoying. But, some of the examples we talked about, I appreciate that it's slowly coming undone in pop culture. How long will that take to move into the rest of the world? I don't know.
We have not made as many strides as we like to think that we have, and they're not as permanent as we like to think that they are.
Do you know that, like, at least once a week, I'm like, I wonder how long before they come and say that I can't have a bank account unless I'm married.
When we were talking about the Good Girls Revolt, I think one of the things I remember the most about that story was when I think it was Gloria Steinem saying that we will never ever hold that much power again, and they never did.
Nope.
There was a moment in time in the 70s where they were the most powerful that they would ever be, and were stalled, and we've never had as much since.
Yeah, it frustrates me a lot that even with like the stepmom trope, women versus women, and yes, that happens in real life.
We've done a lot to dismantle those structures, but there's a lot that is very ingrained across generations, some of which we inflict on ourselves.
A woman president. I'm not saying that a woman would generally do a better job. I'm just saying, why not give them a fair chance?
For the same reason that peasants will block the door of the cathedral to not let Matilda be the first Queen of England.
Well, there we go.
It feels icky.
Right? That's so rude. I am not icky. Fellow tea lovers, before you go, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.